Thanks for introduction, and you made my job very easy because you had already talked introduction part of it. What my topic is time in range versus HbA1c. Why TIR is must in today's era. A1C was discovered in 1968. It began to be used for clinical care in early 1980. As performance of the test improved, clinical uptake was relatively quick, and by end of the 1980, this objective measurement of glycemic control had become a standard of care. In fact, routine measurement of A1C was the first American Diabetic Association in a standard of care published in 1989. So since then, we are using it as a standard of care, and he was talking that it cannot tell you about the hypoglycemia. We all know that goal of diabetes therapy, why we are treating diabetes, it's A is for A1C. That's to improve the A1C to a certain number, that depending on the clinical situation, and for that we have data from DCCT and from UKPDS. HbA1c is a good parameter for a glucose control overall, and which can predict the occurrence because we have the data of last 20 years or 30 years about the occurrence of diabetes related complication. We all know that on left side there is a DCCT trial, on right side there is a UKPDS trial which had shown that even a 1% decrease in HbA1c, it reduces a lot of complication, micro and macrovascular complication in type 1 as well as in type 2. But we are paying, a lot for getting a HbA1c of less than 7 in type 1 diabetic patients. On the right side, you know that 70% of the patients in the DCCT who could achieve, or the target was to achieve less than 7, 60% of the patients, 60 to 70% of the patients had developed severe hypoglycemia. So just by changing the HbA1c, the other side, they were getting 60 to 70% of the patients were getting hypoglycemia. So one of the biggest challenge in diabetes care, one side to get HbA1c low, other side you have a hypoglycemia and weight gain. Already Unni had talked, it is the glycemic variability which is the major hurdle for us. So HbA1c is not always a reliable marker for a good glycemic control. Rather, intensifying or lowering HbA1c alone without keeping blood glucose variation under control typically results in increased incidence of hypoglycemia. You may have a patient with an 8 HbA1c and you try to get it at 7, that's what happened in ACCORD, and they tried to get below 6.9, the target was to get even 6, and ultimately what happened, it increases the chances of getting hypoglycemia, more deaths and everything was there. Since 1990, it has been known that what he had already shown that 2 to 3 different type of patients may have a same HbA1c. So at any given HbA1c, there can be an extremely wide range of mean blood glucose level. And this we know since 1990. So I mean, in 89 it had become a standard of care for the A1C, but from 1990 we know that you may have 2 different type of patients with the same HbA1c, but still completely their glycemic pattern may be different, but it was not well appreciated. After the introduction of a continuous glucose monitoring, it had become that you can have 2 different type of patients with a different glycemic pattern, and CGM had provided the better insight into a real-time glucose trend, which allows, not only it allows to see that, but it allows that tailoring of therapeutic approaches. Like all of you had agreed that these 3 different type of patients which Dr. Unni had shown, they all require different type of therapy. In recent year, with the increasing use of CGM, the ability to classify. So now we are having the CGM for multiple patients, so we can classify that sensor glucose level into various ranges also, and that how the time in range had come, because you are now doing for thousands of patients and you can have sensing the glucose level, and various ranges have been possible. Now, one of the very interesting slide which was there in DCCT research group only, in 1983, there was a hypoglycemia. Those patients who are achieving HbA1c from 9 to 7.2, you can appreciate it was 60% chances they were getting hypoglycemia. The other side, sorry, it's going back, sorry. While in 2008, there is a JDRF CGM trial, which was adults, type 1 subjects were excluded. Severe hypo rate was from 20 per 100 patient. It means from 7.6, they could get 7.1. The rates of hypoglycemia was 20%. The recent one pivotal trial, pediatric and adults type 1, severe hypo rate, 0%. So it means with a continuous glucose monitoring, you can achieve the target HbA1c. In 1983, the same patients who were achieving target HbA1c of less than 7, and they were getting hypoglycemia of 60%. And now in 2016, with the advancement of the glucose monitoring system, as well as with the pump also, the HbA1c they could reduce from 7.7 to 6.9, and severe hypoglycemia rate was 0%. So that's the biggest advantage of this continuous glucose monitoring. He had already shown you the 3 different type of patients, a similar type of slides, that 4 different type of patients may have the same HbA1c, but all of them have a different glycemic variability. Somebody may have a post-breakfast hyperglycemia, other patient may have a post-dinner hyperglycemia, some patients may have a hypoglycemia early morning, some patients may have afternoon hypoglycemia, but ultimately all 4 patients are same HbA1c. But they all had to be treated in a different way. Now let me talk about one patient, and then you know why he had asked me whether your patients wants to get HbA1c or would like to have a time in range. One of my patient, 21 year with a 9 years of diabetes, now currently we are giving her Glargine with Fiasp, that is the best available insulin to our country with the patients. Patient monitor 3 to 4 times sugar. Since 9 years she is a type 1 diabetic. We educated the patients for everything, for the carb counting, for correction dose, for managing the insulin dose, everything. But still the patient fasting sugar is between 74 to 136. On an average post meal sugar between 126 to 228. HbA1c in last 9 years we could not achieve less than 8. The patient was asking constantly why it is happening. You know, I am doing everything. You are saying me 3 times sugar is to be checked. Sometimes I am checking even midnight. I am doing even in afternoon to get me hypoglycemia. Whenever you are saying me 1 unit to increase, half unit to increase, I do all those things, but I get hypoglycemia after that, and my HbA1c come around 8. So we are struggling to get it, and even there is no complication. Recently we put the patient on a CGM, and just we wanted to know what continuously glucose monitoring, no hypo, and we are trying that whether patient we can achieve time in range in around 70%. Now once I explained the patient that if I can keep your glucose in range or time in range for 70%, then patient asked me immediately, then even if I keep my sugar or time in range in 70%, still will I have to get my HbA1c every 3 months? And that's a big question, because if somebody is keeping every day your sugar is well controlled, you are keeping it for 70%, why she needs now HbA1c? So we are moving beyond HbA1c, and I think that's the answer. I told yes, if you can keep your time in range more than 70% or even 65%, I don't think I need your HbA1c which is to be done, because since last 9 years we have done. So why somebody should do a CGM? Like if patient, the same type of patient who is doing 4 times sugar, this type 1 patient was doing 4, but still we are missing many hypo and many hyperglycemia. We know that relationship of multiple time monitoring. Now it's very crude, you know, to tell some patient that you should check your sugar 8 times in a day or 7 times in a day. If somebody is doing a continuous monitoring, he can check it 7 or 8 times, and this is the data which shows that those patients who are doing more than 6 times, 7 times, 8 times, 9 times self-monitoring, even they are doing with the glucose monitor, their HbA1c you can see from 8.5 to 7.2, and that's the data. And if the same thing we do in a continuous glucose monitoring, I am sure a patient can flash it at 6 times, 7 times, 8 times, 10 times, he can do. Then one more data which I wanted to show here, even the number of bolus in type 1 diabetic also makes difference. So it's not that just a 3 shots in a day of a short-acting insulin and 1 long-acting insulin is sufficient to keep the patient time in range. That's not possible. I explained the patient by doing 6 times or 7 times, you can have multiple time correction dose. You can use with the small snacks also 1 and 2 units. And here you can see the data which is actually from Thomas Dane. I took this slide. Their patients are taking even 7 to 10 shots in a day, and these are the patients on pump, and there are patients who are on basal bolus therapy also. Those patients who are taking shots more than 6, 7 or 8 shots, you can see there is a significant difference in HbA1c. So then I told that if you can do all these things with the CGM and taking multiple bolus, probably I may achieve your time in range for 70%. And then there are paper in 2009 itself by using sensor, when the sensor people started in type 1 diabetic continuous glucose monitoring, you can see significantly difference as far as their HbA1c reduction is concerned. So I mean, this is what the continuous glucose monitoring in all those patients who are on basal bolus therapy. There is one recently published data in 2018 which I like in a GOLD 3 trial. These all patients are not on pump therapy, they are on the basal bolus therapy, and you can see the patients who are on conventional therapy, and the difference between the CGM therapy. So all those patients who are on continuous glucose monitoring, while others who are doing self-monitoring of blood glucose, maybe 3 times to 4 times. And then the switch over. So the patients who are on conventional therapy, now they are on a continuous glucose monitoring, while other side, those patients who are on conventional therapy, they were put on a CGM, and you can again see the difference between the patients who are on conventional therapy, now put on a CGM, and those patients who are on CGM, on conventional, you can see a significant difference as far as their A1C reduction is concerned. So as he was talking that I was the part of this meeting of international consensus on use of continuous glucose monitoring. Yes, I was in the 2017 when we had come out with a guideline that when the CGM should be used, and then the clinical targets and time in range. Again, I was one of the experts for this time in range paper, which was published by American Diabetic Association in Diabetes Care. He had already talked about the CGM based targets for different population, for type 1, type 2, GDM, and with the patients who are already, I mean the pre-GDM also. So the new matrix is very clear. It's a 70 to 180, and that to 70% of the time in range. And when you are talking time in hypoglycemia, when you are talking of time in range, you should understand also the hyperglycemia and hypoglycemia, and there is a level 1 and 2 and level 1 and 2 in hyperglycemia 2. There is a definite relationship, direct relationship with the 70% patients. If they are keeping time in range, their HbA1c will be correlated. It will be always less than 7%. So there is a big difference between A1c and time in range, because A1c evaluates a single HbA1c level, while time in range, it evaluates continuous glucose level. I always tell it's like a video, while HbA1c is like a single photograph. You are just taking a photograph on Facebook, on WhatsApp. You try to get, photograph best of best, and it will be always smiling. But when you take somebody in time in range, you will not get similar type, because it's going to give you the continuous video message, and that's the biggest difference between A1c and that. We have the data, the validation of time in range and outcome measure already here shown the same slide. When the patients who are keeping their time in range more than 50% and more than 70%, you can see significant difference as far as microvascular complications are concerned in type 1. Now, you may ask that we are treating many type 2 diabetic patients. This is all data which we had shown for type 1, and we are having more data for type 2. But this recently paper which is published in this month journal only from a Chinese, the time in range is associated with carotid intima media thickness in type 2 diabetes patients. And you can see the patients who could manage, or time in range more than 70%, there's a significant difference in the microvascular complication, mainly for the retinopathy. So fully adjusted model, with each 10% increase in time in range, there is a 6.4% lower risk of abnormal CIMT, that is carotid intima media thickness, which is a marker for a macrovascular complication also. So that does not mean that we are only with, there are not many papers which were published from India also. One of the paper which we had published from our center, that use of AZP for improving monitoring and managing type 2 diabetic patient. This paper from different centers of our city, as well as some other co-authors are there, and we had used this AZP model to improve the monitoring as well as for the monitoring. With Unni also, we had come out with a consensus statement of use of AZP in type 2 diabetic patients, and we had come with a consensus. And last to last year with RSSDI, Manoj was the first author. Again, we have done the consensus and recommendation on a continuous glucose monitoring also. So I just want to give 2 more minutes, because there are one type 2 diabetic patient. So now this is what we are doing, intermittent continuous glucose monitoring, what we are using in our type 2 diabetic patients. And again, in that intermittent, we are calling the patients in a 5th, 6th day, and again on 10th day, and again on 14 days. So from the 14 days graph, we are trying to get 2 or 3 graphs just to save the money of the patient. A type 2 diabetic patients and a dual therapy, slightly uncontrolled. Diet is uncontrolled, and patient is not ready to understand that my diet is bad. When you are saying that, breakfast which I take idli, or sometime I take some other carbohydrate, it can increase my sugar. And just to educate the patient was on a oral anti-diabetic therapy, not the idea that we want to detect the hypoglycemia, what we have done. And you can see the post-breakfast hyperglycemia was there. So after 4 days when patient had come, again on 8th day, I told that you have to change your breakfast. And what we had explained the patient, and you can see the last 6 days report, it was absolutely well controlled. The patient was otherwise also on agents which are metformin and gliptin, and patient was not getting hypoglycemia. But the HbA1c used to come 7.4, 7.5. And I wanted to get this patient at 6.4 or below 6.5. and just by controlling the diet, and patient was not ready to understand that my diet can be responsible for this 6.5 or 6.4. The other guy who is on a multiple OHA, a 10 years of diabetes with HbA1c of 9.3. I'm sure all of you will agree this patient require insulin only. With a data, with the guideline currently showing that patient with a 8.5 with a multiple OAD, more than 3 OAD, is uncontrolled diabetic patient has to be on insulin. Patient was real difficult, patient was not ready to understand that patient requires insulin. I just explained, let us do your continuous glucose monitoring and let's see what happens. So the first 4 days, 5 days report you can see on the left side. The first 5 days when we call the patient, and I told that every time you are eating too much, I mean it's your food habit which is responsible for increasing. And let me start, instead of insulin, can I give you the GLP-1? And what's GLP-1? Exactly, I explained the patient and we had started the patient on a GLP-1. On 6th day onward, you can see the same patient. Now from 6th day, on the 10th day, the sugar is absolutely well controlled. I mean, in every 3rd day, and patient had come on 6th day, and last 4 days and 5 days, you can see the patients. Rather, I have decreased the dose of oral anti-diabetic agents, particularly sulfonylurea on the next setting and the last setting. And patient had not gone in hypoglycemia with a minimal dose of, sulfonylurea, GLP-1, metformin, and patient was on glitazone. So, this is the what we can do. Even this patient was supposed to be on insulin, and this patient had done fantastically. So, I'm just giving two. There are many more examples which we'll be talking. So, to conclude my talk, time in range is a key metric of quality of glucose control. Although HbA1c is the current gold standard for assessing glycemic control, but time in range may be linked to pathogenesis of diabetes complications. So we don't know, it's just only by, we explained till that only by HbA1c, but probably it's a time in range which is going to give us the more about the diabetes complication. It can impact patient diabetes management and more of it quality of life. This is much more. Evidence is beginning to emerge linking between lowering the time in range increases the risk of long-term diabetes complications. So if you have a patient with a 30% only in time in range, he may have HbA1c of 7, he will have more complication. There are data which I had not shown even in the pregnancy and GDM also it is. CGM should be expressed as a time in range. So now the AZP is not only with the LibrePro, even with the Dexcom also, my patients which are using, they also give the ambulatory graph, AZP graph, and at the same time you can see the time in range. It detects within day-to-day glycemic variation. So every day you may have the different glycemic variability which may enhance patient self-management of diabetes. More randomized trials are needed, as yes, definitely, because now we need more trials for the relationship between glucose variability, hard endpoints like microvascular complication, as well as for macrovascular complications, CV outcome, and recent data here already talked the time in range, the target should be 70%, and for 25% patient may go more than 180, and 5% time it may go below 70, but less than 54, it should not be more than 1% of the time. That's very, very important. With this, I thank you very much. Once again, thanks Unni for giving me an opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Banshi, for the wonderful talk.